Hi everyone, hope you're having a good week. This week, this module, we're going to be talking about writing goals and objectives. And one of the assignments, we're going to be practicing writing SMART goals. So I wanted to, in this lecture, just talk a little bit about goal writing, measurable goals, and the background behind SMART goal writing. So I wanted to start off with going over something that we've already discussed in previous modules, which is what are the required components of IEPs. So first off, we know that a student will do an assessment, and you'll get assessment data, and then we will talk about and create those present levels of academic achievement, either based on just the assessment data, if this is a new IEP, but also just looking about the team members will give feedback on present levels and how that student is doing as of the time of the IEP meeting. And those present levels of service are used to create measurable annual goals. And those annual goals, the IEP is also going to be talking about the measurement of those goals. So how is the student doing in regards to what's the progress towards achieving those goals that were in the IEP? And then once those goals are created, then we can talk about the student's needs in relation to special education, related services, supplementary aids and services, and all of this is obviously based on peer-reviewed research as much as possible. It's also going to, the IEP is also, as we talked about, discussing the extent to which the student will not participate with students without disabilities. So, we've talked about FAPE and LRE, least restricted environment. And so it will talk about what is the least restrictive environment for that student and why. And then it also discusses accommodations, modifications, start dates, and frequency of services and the modifications. And as we discussed in the last module, it will potentially, based on their age, and if they need a transition plan, then it would also include a transition plan. So measurable goals is what we're going to be talking about this week. So first off, it's important that these goals are going to help the student. It's going to help them meet the needs that result from the disability to enable the student to be involved in and make progress in the gen ed curriculum. So how can the student, for instance, you don't want them just to be participating in the back of the room, but you want them to really be in their least restrictive environment. And so participating to the maximum extent possible in their least restrictive environment. So that means that these goals need to be based on how can the student be involved and make progress in that environment. And it needs to meet each of the student's other disability-related educational needs. So the family involvement in goal setting. So I really like it when the team send me information in advance of the meeting. And that doesn't always happen, but it really is nice because it's really hard to review all that information at the meeting. And, sometimes it's really just going to help the parents and the family be involved in that goal setting. So if you can, provide information to the family in advance, it allows them to review the developmental progress and the current levels of performance, because sometimes what's happening at school isn't exactly what's happening at home. And so it allows the parents to provide that feedback, or the family to provide that feedback to the IEP team. And that's just going to result in better goals for that student. And it's going to allow that conversation to happen in the IEP meeting. And it's also important to ask the parents, do you agree or disagree with the stated progress or performance levels? Because sometimes, like I said, they might see something different at home, and so the team might come up with a goal and they think, oh boy, that's just not something that I think is relevant because I'm seeing that at home. Or maybe that goal needs to get adjusted because of what the family is seeing at home versus at school. And the family should also be involved in determining how these goals are going to be measured and how the family is going to be regularly informed. So, is it just going to be a paper coming home each quarter, which I wouldn't recommend, or how is that communication? We talked about how important communication is, and communication is really, really important in regards to talking to families about measuring progress towards those goals. And I think that a lot of times it's really nice. I mean, it needs to be formalized, but it's also really helpful for that conversation to kind of the back and forth that's coming from the classroom to the home to include just, hey, we saw some real progress on this particular goal that we've been working really hard on, and celebrate those successes as they come up. Like we've talked about in the past, sometimes it's just really important, and it's nice for families to hear success stories and strengths and things that are going well. And so that's just one easy way to really talk to families about, the progress that's being made in the classroom. And again, that builds the trust with the team as well for those families. So things to consider. Does the goal represent student and family visions? Is that what this, looking at short and long-term goals? So, I mean, even if you have a student who's in fourth grade, say, you can still kind of you can still talk to the family and the students about, hey, are you thinking post-secondary education? What are you thinking? What are they really, where are they planning on going to middle school, high school? What is the plan? And really, what are their interests? So it's important to ask about that. Um, you need to consider access to active participation in the inclusive setting. So now, again, I just talked about that, but just making sure that they are involved in that classroom in their least restrictive environment. To really consider family culture, values, and priorities. So again, talking to the families about, hey, what do these goals fit your priorities and values, and is that what you're really wanting to work on, kind of based on what you're seeing at home and what your family culture is. And I think this is really important. So are student interests, strengths, and priorities and challenges, are those represented? So, I just had an IEP meeting for my 9-year-old, and I invited him to the meeting. And, involvement in your IEP meeting looks different at the age of 9 than it does, say, at 16. But I think it's just really important. One of the questions that the team asked my son is, hey, what are you interested in? What kinds of things do you like at school? What do you think your strengths are? What's hard for you at school? And, when you ask that, either ask the student if they're there or ask the family if the family is representing the student. Ask them, what their thoughts are on what the student likes to do. And, if you think, and also the team members to say, gosh, he really loves to do math. It's really a strength of his, and, really focus on those strengths as well, because that's really, it's good to know because it'll help you with that goal setting in the future. You need to make sure that the goals are chronologically age appropriate, as well as generalizable. And then also just not looking at the academic goals, but also looking at enhancement of friendships and social opportunities and other things like that. Making sure that goals are enhancing the child and family quality of life. So is this really making their lives easier, better? Is this something are these goals going to help? Again, it goes back to the student family visions and family culture. And do these goals have a strong connection to future outcomes? So again, even though a student might be in fourth grade, does this kind of have a connection to that long-term plan that family might have for that student? So this is a quote that I really liked from the Turnbull readings this week. We discussed as a group the goals we wanted my son to achieve. As a group, we came to the same conclusions as far as strategies to implement the goals we wanted my son to attain. The whole process was very beneficial to me as a parent. We all know what our role would be to help my son attain his goals. The program was a huge success in my opinion. So this is what you want parents to really feel like when they leave that meeting. So you don't want any surprises. You want them to really understand what their child's present levels are, where, be actively and equally involved in creating those goals with the rest of the team. And you want those goals to be very student specific. So you want them to be really based on kind of what the students' goals are and what they would like for themselves, as well as what the family values are. We've already mentioned this, but it's important reminder that goals and objectives need to be based on student needs. So again, that's either the assessment data or a combination of assessment data and the present levels. And you should always, like I said, start there. There's a couple resources there up on the screen that I will leave for you in case you'd like to look at more information based on what's going on in Colorado. These goals and objectives should not be pulled from a database of generic goals. It's like we've talked about in the previous modules, an IEP is very individualized. So, just, going to a database and grabbing a goal for hearing loss, for instance, is not going to be, that's not the way for an IEP to become very individualized. So you really need to, again, start with the assessment data, present levels, and really look at that individual student's needs and create goals that way. You can always look at examples but you want to make sure that you very much consider that individual student's needs. And this is one thing that I sometimes have a problem with is you want to make sure it's not overwhelming. So, sometimes at the beginning of the school year, you have that IEP meeting and it's easy to think, oh, I want to go for all these things because it's hard to prioritize the importance of everything. And it's important to remember that you can always add or change goals, get rid of goals at any point in time. You can reconvene the IEP meeting team together so that you can reassess. But you want to make them achievable. So you want to make sure that, it's not going to be frustrating for both the team and the student. And you want to just be able to focus on what's most important at that point in time. So when we create goals, we're going to be practicing this week writing SMART goals. So SMART means specific, measurable, using action words, realistic and relevant, and time limited. Specific means they need to be very clear descriptions of what's going on. So if somebody outside the IEP team comes in and reads that goal, they need to be able to clearly understand what the goal is. Next thing is measurable. So that means that you can count or observe it. So if you can't read a goal and determine how much progress the child has made since the goal was created, then it's probably not measurable. If it's measurable, you're going to know easily when that child reaches that goal. There's not going to be any confusion about that. It's going to use action words in relation to direction of behavior, area of need, level of attainment. So are you trying to increase, decrease, or maintain a behavior? What does the area need? Reading, writing, there's many different things. What's the level of achievement? Are you trying to get them to an age level, a reading skill level, trying to get them to do something without assistance, things like that. And SMART IEPs use action words like the child will be able to, and those are action words. Realistic and relevant. So you want to make sure they're going to be achievable. So again, that goes back to making sure that the goals are created based on present levels. So if there's any misunderstanding, or if you're not looking at those present levels, it's easy to make sure for it to become unrealistic and unachievable, and that can get really frustrating both for the IEP team and for the student. They need to be relevant based on student interest, where the students are at, what they're learning, really just looking at where the student's at before you start writing those goals. Time limited. So you want to always have a time frame on it. So are these goals based on an academic year? Are there dates? So again, you can't measure progress unless you actually have an end date that you're trying to accomplish a goal by. And that allows you to monitor progress at regular intervals. So I wanted to mention some common problems when writing goals. So sometimes we use jargon or vague wording. Again, that comes back to you really want somebody from the outside. Are the goals understandable and very clear to anyone who's reading them? Because the worst thing that could happen is, the IEP team, is trying to monitor progress, and they sit down and they read it again, and it made sense at the IEP meeting, but then when they're trying to measure progress, they're like, I don't remember what we were talking about and what that meant. So that can really happen if you use vague wording. Misusing percentages, so 80% of the time, things like that. You want to make sure that you don't, there's no performance, sometimes there's no performance criteria or inadequate performance criteria. And if we're not writing SMART goals, sometimes that can happen. The goal can be very vague, like I want to increase the reading and so and so's reading ability. Well, to what performance criteria? And we've talked about this a lot. So aligning with present levels and abilities. You want to make sure that they're making common sense, and lastly, making sure that they include any information that you have in regards to student behavior. So there are a lot of great resources that we included in the module in regards to helping you kind of really think about SMART goal writing, and so I urge you to look at those resources and pay attention. You're going to be helping write a lot of SMART goals in your careers, and so I just want to make sure that that's something that you have a good basis of. So feel free, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to ask Dr. Mueller or myself. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this module. Have a good week.